Once upon a time, there was a monastery. It was an old and falling apart monastery up on a hill. Aren't they all? And in this monastery that was old and falling apart, there were just 4 old monks and the abbot left. You might have heard this story. You might have heard it from me. It was one of the first stories I told you when we started this ministry together 4 years ago. It's a story that M. Scott Peck shares, and a parable that I think, I can't think of a more important one for religious community in our times. Well, these 4 old monks, they were getting rather sad about the state of their old falling apart monastery. And the abbot noticed this, and wise abbot as he was, he knew that he didn't have the answers. He knew that he couldn't figure out what to do to turn this monastery around and get the young people back in and revitalize the place. And so he went on a little pilgrimage down the road to the local rabbi. They were on good terms and had counseled one another in the past. And so he asked the rabbi, friend, what shall we do? Our monastery is falling apart. Oh, and the rabbi began by just commiserating. It's like that at the temple too. And they had their tea and commiserated about how the state of religious community in the world and how things were maybe never going to get better, at least not in their lifetimes. And the abbot said, "So, Rabbi, you don't have any advice for me?" The end of their time together, and the rabbi said, No advice. But I guess I should tell you, I had a dream last night. And in the dream, it was revealed to me that one of your monks there at the monastery is the Messiah. And the abbot said, "Oh, you buried the lead." One of the monks is the Messiah. And the rabbi said, "Yes, the Messiah is among you." And so the abbot came back to his monastery, and the monks, of course, were eager to hear what advice the rabbi had, what they were going to do. "What's the plan, abbot? What's the plan?" And the abbot said, "Unfortunately, I'm sorry, the rabbi didn't have any advice. There is no plan. But he did tell me about this odd dream he had just the night before I came and visited. And in his dream, he said it was revealed to him. And I respect him. He's a holy man, this rabbi, that one of us here is the Messiah, that the Messiah is among us." And they all chewed on that one for a while. It seemed like an odd thing to be revealed. And so they would go about their daily monthly life, and the bowing and the chanting and the sitting and the making cheese or beer or whatever it was they made at that monastery. And then they would think occasionally about that idea. One of them would think, "Gosh, one of us is the Messiah?" And then, of course, there weren't very many of them, right? So they would start thinking like, well, it could be Jerry. Jerry could be the Messiah. But no, Jerry, he just gets so cranky. He's so mean sometimes. No way the Messiah could be mean like that. Oh, but then again, he is always right. Maybe Jerry is the Messiah. And they would think, no, maybe Ted. Maybe Ted's the Messiah. Well, yeah, he does always have these great big ideas, visionary leadership. Maybe we should just, if we all just would realize that Ted, well, but no, he doesn't seem to put in the hard work that the rest of us do. It can't be Ted. Ted's not. Well, but what if it was? And they would think of this, and then suddenly one of them would think, well, and maybe could I be the Messiah? I never felt like the Messiah. I don't have good ideas like the Messiah. I'm not loving all the time like the Messiah should be, but maybe that's all. Maybe it's me. And what these thoughts did for these people was a little bit hard to see at first. But over time, they began to treat each other a little bit differently with that question in the back of their head, maybe this is the Messiah I'm speaking to. They would speak a little more kindly, a little more reverently to each other. They'd speak and treat themselves with a little bit more reverence. And one day a visitor came because they'd heard about this beautiful spot up on top of a hill, and they came to enjoy the beauty of it, and they noticed there was this feeling in the air among the monks who lived there, this hard-to-name quality of love and joy and reverence. And they told their friends about this beautiful day they'd had at the monastery, and pretty soon people were coming and families were bringing their kids up to have picnics up at this monastery. And I'm not going to tell you that a whole bunch of people came and decided to be monks. But there was a sweet spirit in the place that kept it renewed and vital for a new generation to make what they would of it. The industrial growth society that we've inherited is coming to an end. It's not imminent, but it's in the next couple hundred years. The logic that underpins it, this logic of growth, that not only do we need to just keep growing and growing and growing, but the rate of growth itself needs to keep growing and growing and growing, right? That's the underlying logic of our industrial growth society, and it can't help but collapse. Joanna Macy has named this as the Great Unraveling, a Buddhist scholar and teacher. She says it's either the Great Unraveling or the Great Turning. And hopefully, really, it's both. And if in the industrial growth society, health is measured by growth, by budgets and capacity and effectiveness, just growing and growing and growing, in the Great Turning, health will be understood differently. Health will be understood as an organic process where sometimes things fall apart and decay, where there are periods of disequilibrium, liminal times of unknowing and uncertainty, and where innovation occurs through emerging coherence, through disorganized processes, rather than top-down leadership and static structures. One of the books I read this summer was called How to Lead When You Don't Know Where You're Going. It's by Susan Beaumont, who is a church consultant. She's one of the prominent mainline Protestant church consultants. And she offers a paradigm to move as a group, to move religious communities from a stance of decision-making about the problems that are in front of us to a stance of discernment. And I was struck. It wasn't an entirely new concept, but I loved the succinctness to go from decision-making to discernment. I was struck by how much of the time I spend in my life organized in a decision-making model, thinking about what's the next step, what's the plan that will get me where I need to go. I think I got really good training in this as a chess player growing up. Henry was enamored when I showed him my chess trophies. Came from my mom's when they moved out of their house. I could think, at least 3, if not 10 moves ahead in my chess games. And now I have a confession to you. I have occasionally thought that that was how to do ministry. Try and get 3 moves ahead, at least. There's a certain kind of semblance of safety in that stance, the planning and decision-making paradigm. It certainly doesn't have the required vulnerability in the kind of play that I began learning as a teenager and has been most important to me and as an adult, which is improvisational play. The kind of vulnerability that says, throw your plans out the window, bring only the honest truth of your presence and what's really happening inside you right now, and touch the world from that place. It's a radical and dangerous stance, one that leaves me open to being hurt more easily, but also touched and moved more quickly. But I think about how hard this is because I keep finding myself going back to playing chess with my life. And so even just as an individual, it's so hard to stop playing chess and listen instead for that still small voice, to touch the world with that authentic, vulnerable, soulful heart. And then I'm reading about Susan Beaumont's ideas, and she's saying not only should we do that individually, we should do that together as a community. We should stop trying to make our plans as a community and listen instead for the call of, she talks about God, the call of Spirit on our community. To ask where we are being led instead of trying to figure it all out in our heads. And then she acknowledges just how difficult this is to do, to discern as a communal practice. To discern together the voice, the still small voice that's calling us individually and collectively. The metaphor that she gives, which is a metaphor I know probably many of you have heard or used in contexts other than this, is the flock of birds. The flock of birds that gather for a murmuration. You've watched this, right? You can see incredible versions of it on YouTube videos. These starlings just all filling the sky with their flocking. And they've studied this, right? The scientists have studied this to figure out how does this happen? How do all of these individual creatures move like this in this incredibly complex? You can't get a group of people to go do a murmuration. We're going to try. but incredibly complex ways that none of them are planning. And they said there's actually just 3 principles. Each bird is operating using 3 principles. Each bird in the flock is following the rule of separation. They're trying to respect the bubble of space around their neighbors, make sure they're not crowding anyone near them. They're following the rule of cohesion. They're trying to stay close enough to the birds near them. They're trying to not get too far from their neighbors. And then they're following the rule of alignment. They're steering their own flight towards the average heading of the 6 closest birds. 3 very simple principles that each bird individually follows, and that from which a much more complex set of functions arises. She also mentioned the example of traffic circles, a similar process. To get through a traffic circle, you actually can't focus on your own goal of where you need to get to. You need to focus on the principle of everyone entering in a way that yields to the cars that are already going, but takes their turn when there's an opening. And it's through each driver focusing on those principles that the traffic circle functions, that it works and creates this more complex, arising, emerging process. I don't know about you, but I'm always a little nervous going into a traffic circle. It doesn't keep you safe, what I'm going to suggest. It makes you come alive. Focusing on principles instead of outcomes. Focusing on what is it that I'm committed to as the principles of how I'm going to engage this life, this experience, this community, instead of the outcomes of what I'm trying to get to. This is the work of spiritual practice. So I've started thinking about my own principles as an aesthetic orientation. I'm going to share a few of them with you. I believe in whimsy and wandering. I believe in bearing witness, in practicing inaction on my impulse to relieve my discomfort. I love layers. I love refraction, the microcosmic reflected in the macrocosmic. Rainbows. Seeing from many angles, the more vantage points, the better. Trust joy, trust the yes. Love the ebb and the flow. Love the expansion and the contraction. Cherish the brokenness. And always seek the underlying wholeness. Leave it unfinished. Messes, wildness, a little crazy is good for you. Sometimes a lot of crazy is necessary. Order in titrated doses when it really feels right. Feelings are always there to help. Always, at least they're trying to. What is true at the depths of anything is true at the depths of everything. Surprise is important. All of these aesthetics of my spiritual life are my attempt to listen to that still small voice, to Great Spirit, come and rest in me. I am thine. I rest in thee. To follow the call of God on my life. But if you want someone who doesn't talk about God to explain all of this to you, Otto Scharmer of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, a very serious scientist, has been developing what he calls Theory U. And it's all the same stuff. And it's great. Otto Scharmer, he talks about presencing as the most important task of engagement in a process of innovation and creation. And he talks about, in order to bring that presence, the presence that allows for something new to emerge, to engage wholly in becoming. He says we have to get rid of three voices. We have to sideline three voices that get in the way. Got to sideline the voice of judgment, that black and white thinking, the one that reduces everything to every complexity down to less, yes and no. The voice that makes managing day-to-day life easier, but negates the open mind. He says, got to let go of the voice of judgment to open the mind. You got to let go of the voice of cynicism, the doubt that protects one from an emotional investment in ideas that could damage the ego. You got to let go of the voice of cynicism that negates the open heart. And then we have to let go of the voice of fear. It says no to new things, that says don't try something, it could be risky, that pursues the status quo as a safety net and negates the open will, negates the ability to act. So letting go of cynicism, of judgment and fear, we align instead our heart and our mind and our will with whatever those organic principles are that underlie everything. And as I've focused on this, I've come to believe in my work as a minister that I'm here to be a wonderer and not a solver. And I'm here to be a sharer of dilemmas and not a savior who knows how to resolve them. I'm trying. So I'll leave you with a favorite poem from Gary Snyder from Turtle Island. The rising hills, the slopes of statistics lie before us, the steep climb of everything going up, up as we all go down. In the next century, or the one beyond that, they say, are valleys, pastures. We can meet there in peace if we make it. To climb these coming crests, one word to you and your children. Stay together. Learn the flowers. Go light. The Messiah is among you. May it be so, and amen.